Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons, and love are told. If you enjoy deep, emotional stories that leave you thinking long after they end, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss more. Now, let me tell you what happened that night that changed everything I thought I knew about my own flesh and blood. It was a quiet Wednesday evening, the kind that felt almost too ordinary to be remembered. The city outside my apartment hummed faintly with distant traffic, and the smell of roasted chicken and rosemary filled my small dining room. My daughter, Clara, sat across from me, her hair tucked behind her ear, talking about her new apartment hunt and how expensive everything is these days. I was half listening, nodding as I spooned some mashed potatoes onto her plate, my mind drifting to memories of her as a child: pigtails, scraped knees, endless laughter. It was one of those rare moments when I felt like we were close again after years of tension following her mother's passing. Then my phone vibrated on the table, screen lighting up with a text from an unknown number. "Turn on the camera. It's about to happen." The words were so out of place that my fork froze halfway to my mouth. Clara didn't notice, she was too busy scrolling through her own phone. I glanced back at the message, my pulse quickening. Who would send me that? And what did they mean by "about to happen"? I felt an odd mixture of curiosity and dread as I opened my laptop, pretending I wanted to show Clara an old photo I'd found. Instead, I clicked into the home security feed linked to the cameras in my house. The screen came alive with grainy footage from the study, the place where I kept my personal files, checkbooks, and the last few reminders of my late wife, Evelyn. The image wobbled for a second, then settled, and there she was. Clara. Inside my study. She wasn't supposed to be there. Earlier, I had locked that door. But on the footage, she moved with ease, sliding open drawers, her fingers quick and confident as she rifled through papers. My breath caught when she lifted my checkbook. She tore out a sheet, sat at my desk, and began writing with deliberate strokes. The camera caught the flash of my own signature being forged under her careful hand. I must have made some sound because she looked up from her phone at the table. "Dad, you okay?" she asked, her voice calm, almost innocent. I forced a smile. Yeah, just remembered something I need to check on later." My mind was racing, each beat of my heart echoing with disbelief. Was this a mistake? Some misunderstanding? Or had she been doing this for longer than I dared to imagine? The rest of dinner blurred into noise. I laughed at the right times, nodded when she spoke, but my mind was glued to that image of her hand moving across my checks. After dessert, she kissed my cheek goodbye and left, her perfume lingering like a ghost. As soon as the door shut behind her, I went straight to the study. The desk drawer was still ajar. My checkbook was indeed missing a page, and the next check in sequence was smudged with the faint outline of pen pressure from the missing leaf. I sank into the chair, my hands trembling. Evelyn's voice came back to me from years ago, soft but firm. "Watch her with money, Alan. She's impulsive. She'll take what she thinks she needs." Back then, I brushed it off as a mother's overprotectiveness. Now I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I went to the bank. The teller, a woman who'd known me for years, confirmed my growing fear. "Mr. Pierce," she said softly, "a check for $5,000 cleared yesterday. It was made out of cash." She slid the image across the counter, and there was my signature, or rather, the imitation of it. Clara's handwriting in the memo line, "Loan repayment." Something broke inside me then. Not just trust, but the image of my daughter as I had always wanted to see her, as someone I could protect, someone who would never harm me. The rest of the day passed in a fog, and that night, I sat in my armchair with a glass of whiskey, replaying every recent conversation we'd had. I thought about the times she'd mentioned money troubles, how she'd always smiled tightly when I offered to help, saying she was handling it. Now I understood what she meant. But I also knew I couldn't act on impulse. If what I saw on the camera was just the tip of something bigger, confronting her now might drive her to hide the rest, or worse, destroy evidence. I needed clarity. I needed proof. And for that, I needed help from someone who wouldn't be blinded by the fact that she was my daughter. That's when I thought of Marcus Lane. Marcus and I had known each other since our early 20s, back when we were both still figuring out life in the chaotic streets of Queens. He'd gone on to spend 30 years with the NYPD, working fraud and financial crimes before retiring. I hadn't seen him in years, but I still had his number. I called him that night, my voice tight as I explained the situation. He listened without interrupting, then let out a slow breath. "Alan, you need to brace yourself. If she's bold enough to forge a check right under your nose, she's already deep in this. And I hate to say it, but it might not be her first time. I need to know for sure," I told him. "Then we start digging," he replied. Quietly. "No accusations yet. If she's been running a game on you, we'll find it. But you've got to promise me one thing, don't warn her." That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized my life had already shifted. Every memory of Clara was now tainted by the question, how long has she been stealing from me? Sleep wouldn't come. All I could see was her in the grainy glow of that camera feed, calmly writing my name as if it belonged to her. And deep down, I already feared the answer to that question. Marcus came over the next morning, his tall frame filling my doorway like a shadow from the past. His eyes scanned my living room before landing on me, and in that instant, I could tell he had already shifted into detective mode. He didn't waste time with small talk. "Show me the footage," he said. I pulled up the camera feed from 2 nights ago, the one that had stolen my sleep. He watched in silence, his face giving nothing away as Clara forged my signature. When it ended, he rubbed his jaw and asked, "Do you have bank statements for the last year?" I fetched a thick folder from my study. Marcus spread them out on my dining table, flipping through with a practiced eye. His finger landed on a withdrawal from 3 months ago, $12,500 I didn't remember authorizing. Then another, $8,000, marked as personal loan settlement. He stacked them in a separate pile. By the time he was done, there were over a dozen questionable transactions. "Alan," he said finally, his voice low, "this isn't just a couple of bad choices. These are patterns. She's been bleeding you dry for months." The words hit like a hammer. I sank into a chair, staring at the numbers as if they might rearrange themselves into something less damning. Why would she? My voice trailed off, because I already knew the answer. Money. Desperation. Entitlement. Whatever it was, it had consumed her enough to turn me into her target. Marcus leaned back. "We're going to need her credit reports. If she's bold enough, she might have opened accounts in your name." 2 days later, after signing the necessary forms, I held the report in my hands and almost dropped it. There were 5 credit cards I didn't recognize, all maxed out. A car loan for a luxury SUV I had never seen. And the worst, my heart sank, was a $500,000 home equity loan taken out against my house, my signature forged on every page. The dates told their own story. It started with a small one card, a few $1,000s. Then a personal loan. Then the car. And then, once she realized she could get away with it, the mortgage-sized fraud that could have left me homeless if payments stopped. The escalation was chilling in its precision. Marcus put a hand on my shoulder. "This is organized, Alan. This isn't spur-of-the-moment stuff. She planned this. She's been running a campaign against her own father." I wanted to argue, to cling to the idea that she was in trouble, that someone else had manipulated her. But the more evidence we uncovered, the harder it was to hold on to that illusion. She had used my social security number, my driver's license copies, things only someone with intimate access could get. For the next week, we worked quietly. Marcus traced addresses on the accounts, finding that most of the credit cards had bills sent to a P.O. box registered under Clara's name. He even managed to get security footage from a bank branch showing her cashing one of the forged checks. There she was, smiling at the teller, as if she were entitled to every dollar. One evening, while going through yet another batch of statements, Marcus found a wire transfer of $25,000 to an account under the name Blue Horizon Consulting. I'd never heard of it. He did a quick search and raised an eyebrow. Alan, this is her boyfriend's LLC. I've seen this trick before, laundering money through a shell company, so it looks like a business expense. The betrayal doubled in weight. It wasn't just her, it was a conspiracy with someone else, someone she trusted enough to share the spoils with. That realization stung almost more than the theft itself. She hadn't just lied to me, she had built a secret life funded by my hard-earned savings. By the 10th day of our investigation, Marcus spread all the evidence across my living room floor: photos, bank records, forged documents, and screenshots. It looked like a case file from his NYPD days. He turned to me, his expression grave. We have enough to go to the police. More than enough. But I need to hear from you. Do you want to do this? I stared at the mess in front of me, at the financial autopsy of my trust. My first instinct was to protect her, to find some way to pay off the debt quietly and hope she would stop. But then I thought about Evelyn, about how she had warned me. I thought about the way Clara had smiled across the dinner table that night, while knowing she had already taken thousands more from me. She's my daughter, I said finally, my throat tight, but if I don't stop her now, she'll ruin herself and me. Marcus nodded once, slowly. Then we will file the report tomorrow. That night, I couldn't bring myself to drink. I sat in silence, looking around the house I'd worked decades to pay for. Every corner was tied to a memory: Clara's first steps on the living room rug, Evelyn reading by the window, birthdays, holidays. And now, the knowledge that my own blood had tried to take it all. Filing the police report was surreal. I handed over the file Marcus had assembled, each page a small death in itself. The officer on duty listened, flipping through the evidence, and assured me they would open an investigation immediately. The next few weeks were a blur of statements, interviews, and waiting. Clara still called me occasionally, asking if I could spot her some money for a temporary setback. I kept my voice steady, and told her I couldn't help right now. Each conversation felt like walking a tightrope, pretending I didn't know what she'd done while detectives built the case. Then, one Thursday evening, I got another text, this time from Marcus: "It's happening tonight. Stay home." I didn't need to ask what he meant. My hand shook as I set the phone down, the memory of that first mysterious text from weeks ago returning in full force. I sat in my armchair, heart pounding, as the clock ticked toward the hour. Outside, the wail of sirens grew louder, then stopped abruptly somewhere nearby. I didn't move. I just stared at the floor, imagining her face when they knocked on her door. When Marcus called later, his voice was steady. "She's in custody. They got her with a warrant." She didn't see it coming. I thanked him, but my chest felt hollow. This wasn't the kind of victory you celebrated. It was the kind that left you sitting in the dark, wondering if you'd just destroyed whatever remained of your family. And yet, beneath the ache, there was a strange, quiet relief. For the first time in months, I knew the bleeding had stopped. The next morning, the detective assigned to the case called me. His tone was professional, but I could hear the undertone of disbelief in his voice as he went over the charges: multiple counts of forgery, identity theft, bank fraud, wire fraud. "Mr. Pierce," he said, "we're talking about federal charges here. This isn't something that'll disappear with a fine." The reality settled in my gut like cold lead. Clara was no longer just my daughter in trouble, she was a federal defendant. I thanked the detective, hung up, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the cup of coffee in front of me. It had gone cold. I didn't even remember pouring it. Marcus came over later that day. He didn't lecture or offer platitudes. He simply sat down across from me, his presence a steady anchor. "They'll probably offer her a plea deal," he said. "But with the amount she took, she's still looking at years inside." I nodded slowly, though my mind was somewhere else entirely. I kept seeing her as a little girl, running down the hallway in pajamas, giggling as she carried a stuffed rabbit. I tried to reconcile that image with the one Marcus had shown me from the bank security footage here, confidently cashing a forged check, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The weeks between her arrest and the trial were some of the longest of my life. I got letters from her, some pleading, some angry. In one, she swore she was innocent, that I'd been set up by people who wanted to ruin our relationship. In another, she admitted to taking a little money but claimed it was out of desperation, promising to pay me back as soon as things got better. By the third letter, she was threatening to never speak to me again if I didn't drop the charges. I didn't respond to any of them. Marcus told me not to, and I knew he was right. Anything I said could complicate the case. But silence came with its own kind of pain. It felt like turning my back on her, even though I knew she had turned her back on me first. When the trial began, the courtroom felt smaller than I expected. The judge sat high above us, flanked by flags, his voice echoing against the paneled walls. Clara sat at the defense table, her hair neatly pulled back, wearing a suit that was too big for her frame. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The prosecutor laid out the evidence with clinical precision: forged checks, fraudulent loan applications, bank statements, the security footage. Each exhibit was a dagger, and though I had seen them all before, hearing them presented aloud made the betrayal raw all over again. Then came my turn to give a victim impact statement. I stood at the podium, gripping the edges so tightly my knuckles ached. My voice shook at first, but I forced myself to keep going. I raised my daughter alone after her mother passed, I began. I worked long hours, missed holidays, did everything I could to make sure she had a good life. I trusted her completely. And over the last year, she used that trust to steal nearly everything I built. This isn't just about money, it's about the destruction of a relationship I thought could never be broken. There was a pause when I finished. Clara didn't look up. The judge thanked me and motioned for me to sit. The defense tried to frame her actions as the product of grief and financial pressure, painting her as a woman who had made bad choices in a moment of weakness. But the sheer scope of the fraud, the planning, the forged documents, the shell company transfers left little room for sympathy. In the end, the judge sentenced her to 4 years in federal prison, with an order to pay restitution. It was less than the maximum, but more than I think she ever expected. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt the weight of finality settle on my shoulders. This was not a story with a happy ending. I had not saved her. I had not restored our bond. I had chosen to protect myself, and the cost had been the last thread connecting us. The first few weeks after the sentencing were strange. The constant anxiety of waiting for the next financial blow was gone, but so was the daily rhythm of checking in on her, hearing her voice, believing foolishly that we were still a team. There was an emptiness in my days that I filled with long walks, home repairs, and coffee with Marcus. He told me once, over black coffee at the diner, "You did the only thing you could." You think letting her get away with it would have saved her? No. It would have taught her she could destroy you and walk away smiling. I knew he was right. But knowing and feeling are two different beasts. At night, I sometimes woke up thinking I heard her footsteps in the hallway, only to remember the truth. Months passed. I got a letter from her once, from prison. It was short. No apology, no admission. Just a single line: "I hope you can live with yourself." I folded it up and put it away in a drawer. Somewhere along the way, I stopped expecting reconciliation. Instead, I started thinking about what my life could be now without the shadow of her betrayal hanging over me. I joined a local community group, reconnected with old friends, and even took a short trip upstate to see the fall leaves, something I'd always told myself I'd do next year. Justice hadn't brought me joy. But it has brought me peace. And maybe that was enough. If you've made it this far into my story, you know this wasn't easy. Choosing justice over blood is a wound that never fully heals. But sometimes, protecting yourself is the only way to keep what's left of your soul intact. To anyone listening who's been betrayed by someone you love, I want you to remember, setting boundaries doesn't make you cold, it makes you whole. So, if you enjoyed this story and took something from it, please like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more stories like this. And in the comments, tell me, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Moral lesson: love is powerful, but without boundaries, it becomes a door for destruction. Guard your trust carefully, for even those closest to you can turn it into a weapon. Justice is painful, but it is also a path to healing. True love sometimes means stepping back, closing the door, and letting accountability do its work, even when your heart breaks in the process.